Jen knows she's going to Kansas. I was texting Elizabeth. She's on her way. I don't think so.
Where's she from?
Kansas.
Kansas.
The show me state.
Or no, not the band, like Dust in the Wind, Kansas.
No, the state.
This will be good to read, thank you. Oh, thank you for the West Coast. Hey, how you doing?
Good afternoon. This regular council meeting is called to order at 4 o'clock. Can my mic get turned down a bit,
Yeah, they all seem
Samantha? Testing, testing, testing. That's better, thank you. Council would like to acknowledge the Ukluathot on whose traditional territories the District of Uklulit operates. Audience members and delegates are advised that this proceeding is being video recorded and broadcast on YouTube and Zoom, which may store data on foreign servers. Are there any late items? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Councillor Kennington?
I'll
Second.
second that. Oh,
Whoa, tie.
on the ball today.
Second by Councillor Mafty. All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. We have 2 delegations this afternoon. Please try and limit your presentation to 10 minutes if possible. Our first delegates are Bob Hanson and Mandy Lawrence from WildSafe BC Pacific Rim. And the floor is yours. You may have to turn that mic on. I'm not sure if it's turned on or not.
All right. Thank you, Your Worship and Council, for the opportunity to report on the 2023 activities of the WildSafe BC Pacific Rim program. My name is Bob Hanson, and I've been in the role of community coordinator for our region for 6 years. Last year, the program had 2 community coordinators, and again this year we had 2 community coordinators. And I shared the position with Mandy.
Hello, Your Worship and Council. My name is Mandy Lawrence. I've been on the program since spring this year, alongside Bob Hanson as a WildSafe BC Community Coordinator. The presentation we're gonna deliver today will give you an overview of wildlife activity in the area since April this year, but we will also present challenges and opportunities in the coexistence with wildlife, seized to help keep our local wildlife wild and community safe.
The next few slides, and where do I point? There. All right.
Bob's over that way.
Oh, okay. All right. There we go. The next few slides will sketch out an overview with the help of some highlight numbers. And these numbers provide context for the final portion of our presentation, where we'll be talking about the road ahead for coexisting with wildlife. So here are some numbers that represent challenges experienced in coexistence. In 2023, we had 9 food condition bears active in the region. One was lethally euthanized. We had 66 polycarts, the new polycarts, trash and organics, accessed by bears. 40 were trash and 22 were organics. On 29 of those, the carabiners were broken. We had 15 occasions where bears dragged away unanchored carts and then broke into them. We had 1 bear cub die in a collision with a vehicle. 3 buildings entered with when people were there, and 4 sheds/structures damaged by bears. 5 occasions where bears took advantage of fruit trees and or gardens. 4 instances of bears going after chickens. 3 outdoor freezers hit by bears. 49 close encounters, and in 4 of those instances there was bluff charges, and in 1 occasion the person actually used bear spray.
Can you show me what you did?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That one.
That one. All right.
Yeah.
To round out the overview Bob just gave to all of you, we also have a lot of encouraging news to report. With the help of many collaborators, we have been undertaking a broad scope of activities this year to enhance the safety of Ucluelet as a community, but also of the local wildlife. And I would like to give you some examples. So we have been delivering 31 wildlife safety and awareness presentations this year, reaching 360 people. But we also presented 8 wild safe ranger presentations at local elementary schools, reaching 302 students and teachers. We have been out and about with about 11 display booths this year, reaching over 1,198 people. And the most of these people we actually reached at UK Days this year, which is always a great opportunity for us to be. We also had 6 door-to-door activities, which delivered information packages to 224 residents. We've also really pushed our messaging on our Facebook page. We did 72 Facebook posts, which reached over 28,000 accounts, and we could achieve 10% more followers and 11% more page likes.
Yeah. So carrying on, in terms of activities, Manny mentioned that there's a broad scope of activities. So they also included 10 media appearances, including radio, podcasts, newspaper articles, and videos. 19 businesses are working on becoming wild safe businesses. 7 have actually completed, and we think we may have another one tomorrow, bringing that up to 8, and 12 in progress. There's 17 electric fencing projects. 8 were completed, 1 is pending installation this fall, and 9 detailed consultations that we hope will lead to further installations. We conducted 7 workshops, 3 of which were bear spray training workshops, and 4 were electric fencing workshops. And there were numerous personal interactions in the public and on social media. The foundation of our program is meeting up with people that are experiencing challenges with wildlife, and whether it's in their backyard or at their business or wherever, and just working together on solutions and prevention.
Okay, to give you a little visual impression of how our work looks like in the field, we put together a video for you to show our 2023 season in a nutshell.
So, as every year, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the district for the funding and the unwavering support over all the years of the program. It's really greatly appreciated. So this is the final portion of the presentation, and it's looking at the road ahead. And these are just some key what we see as milestones on this journey, coexistent journey, as time goes on. The new wildlife attractive management bylaw for Tofino is getting closer. It has been approved unanimously by Mayor and Council, and it is now with Ministry of Forests for final approval. And then we're hoping to bring that forward to the district here for consideration, and also the ACRD. The next, we would like to recommend consideration of adding wild safe waste management best practices as conditions on business licenses, and also as part of development permits. And we would encourage the continued commitment to pursuing Bear Smart status for Ucluelet, and the expansion of the access to current and real-time information wherever possible on wildlife, on both the district website and the Tourism Ucluelet website, and other portals where people access information. And given the experiences of the last 6 years, and where we see the challenges year to year are dynamic. Last 2 years, the main issues were bears breaking into sheds. There was over 80 sheds broken into. Commercial bins, last year there was over 21 commercial bins accessed. Chickens, over the last 2 years there was 20 places where chickens were targeted. And grease bins was another big category the last 2 years. This year looked completely different. It was hardly any numbers in any of those categories, and almost all the numbers were related to the residential carts. So we had a complete switch from the patterns of past recent years to this year, and it just showed the need for a program to be dynamic and responsive and adaptive to meet the challenges as they come. And with that in mind, we would hope to host discussions this winter around securing a funding model that would resource a year-round position for the WildSafe program, and which would again allow us to really expand our activities. And there's much that we could be doing, but it's not feasible to do it during bear season. All right.
We would like to close our presentation with a big thank you to all of you for your support over the years and for your great leadership. And it has been great working together, and we hope to continue like that for many years to come. And I'd also like to add, we added some information materials for you for your review. Did everyone receive these?
Were they part of our agenda package?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes, just want to make sure. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. Can you stay for a few questions? Okay. I'll just start. The numbers that you presented in that first slide, Appendix 1, the wildlife activity, was that just Ucluelet, or was that the whole peninsula? The region, okay. And where was the bear cub killed? Was it on the highway?
It was in the park.
Oh, in the park.
Near the Wickeninish Road turnoff.
Okay. If you don't mind speaking into the microphone.
Yeah. So that was in the park on the main Highway 4 near the Wickeninish Road turnoff.
Oh. Any questions from council for Bob?
Through the mayor, I was just curious about those reported numbers. How are you gathering those numbers, and is it likely much higher than that just from non-reported incidents of people not calling in their bins being towed away? Or
Yes, we've really been working on trying to let everyone know that they can forward their information to us. And I think as each year we get the sense that more and more people are less and less hesitant to report things to us. And there is the 24/7 report line called RAP for the Conservation Officer Service. And it's well known that there's quite a degree of reluctance in calling that line. So the last 2 years in particular, we created our own database, and we input all the confirmed reports that we come across. So people calling us directly from the RAP line, sometimes the conservation officers actually send us reports directly from bylaw services, from Facebook. We do our best to any report in our database has been confirmed, so we'll follow up until we're actually talking to the person that actually was involved. So we're pretty comfortable with those numbers, and I'm also sure that it's under reporting.
right. Thank you.
Other questions from council? Councillor Anderson?
It looked like there was one particularly sneaky bear last summer that had figured out how to use, I'm allowed to here, that figured out how to use or break those beaners. Was that the bear that was euthanized, do you think? Or, and the second part would be, is there, I think there's an upgrade to those beaners, because I think mine were broken, and then there was other ones brought, so I think they're better, the second ones, or was there an upgrade to those?
That was something that we were part of a working group working in collaboration with the CRD, and it did become evident that is the weakest part of the cart, is those, and 9 bears from the region independently figured out how to break those carabiners. So they were in different communities, multiple bears, all arrived at the same weakness in design. And what really made that possible was the bears were able to drag carts away, and if they could get the cart into the bush somewhere secluded where they could work at length and spend hours or even days really going at that cart, they all independently through that means figured out how to break the carabiners. Once they had learned that, then they didn't have to drag away carts anymore. They could just go up and just grab the carabiner and twist it.
Right.
So right now, for this winter and throughout the whole season, we've really been emphasizing how important it is to anchor carts. That is the critical prevention action. And we've also been in discussion with the ACRD about swapping those brass carabiners with steel carabiners, and hope to keep that conversation going.
Excellent. Thank you.
Oh, the bear that was euthanized, that was as result of an attack on a dog with a person working in a remote area in the region, walking her dog, and the bear came out. The dog was only 2 meters from her and grabbed her dog and killed it. And then was still on scene when it was investigated and was put down at that time. So no food condition bears were put down this year. That's can't remember the last time we didn't have a bear killed due to food conditioning. So very different year this year.
Right. Well, thank you.
And last year, the bears figured out how to open car doors, which I witnessed myself.
So over the last 2 years, I think it was 41 vehicles opened, and the 80 plus sheds over the 2 years. This year, 3 or 4 sheds and no vehicles open. So that's how dramatically different years can be in terms of the bears are always searching out the easiest and most efficient way to get calories.
Councillor Mafty?
Yeah, through the mayor, just a comment and a question, and the comment is just to congratulate you on your efforts. I'm well familiar with your work. I think it's really important. I hope, I know one of our staff is going to meet with you shortly to see if we can do something with the res. I think this is a program that people who live here, who see you at these outreach events, who see the material, start to take for granted, and I think that's really great. And my concern with programs like this is always that we can maintain support to keep them going, because obviously a lot of the issues that crop up with visitors to our community who just aren't familiar. They don't have the perspective, they don't have the benefit of experience, and it seems, at least from the people I know who have moved here recently, it's often, oh yeah, it's this abstract thing that bears are around until something happens, and then they're like, oh yeah, wait a minute, this is a problem for me too. So I think this is a great program, and I just wanted to publicly go on the record and strongly endorse it. And then my question for you, and I'm not trying to put you on the spot here, I looking through some of the material you provided, a lot of your partners, funders, collaborators, I see that you do have some funders. I noticed that one of your looking towards the future goals was to secure stable multi-year funding. Do you have a specific number in mind, or is there something that I know that's not why you came here, but since you're here, I want to ask you if there's something specific that you could share with the council that you'd be looking for.
I unfortunately did not come prepared for that question, and my thinking is that when we all sit together and brainstorm around a funding model, that we'll work through a process where we'll come up with a number that's reasonable and feasible. And I'm just not sure. I don't have the experience to even estimate what that might take. So I'll need
Sure.
the experience everyone in those discussions to bring to it, and have them say, well, actually, this is probably what you should be looking at.
The only thing I'd say then, noticing that the District of Ucluelet has been a funder in the past, is my personal feeling is that any money that we're in a position, that the district is in a position, that the community's in a position to invest in this program is money really, really well spent, considering what we get from the program and the positive impacts that the program brings to the community for locals and visitors and everyone. So
Thank you. Thank you.
And just a little further to that, our grant and aid deadline is December 15th, if that's a program you want to get funds from. Otherwise, we're starting our budget process December 1st. So we'll be in touch, I guess. Okay, thank you for your presentation. Our second delegate this afternoon is Barb Beasley, Secretary of Alliance Holdings Limited. The floor is yours. Welcome.
Thank you, Your Worship and councillors. I'm here today on behalf of Alliance Holdings and the people that live there. And in case you're not aware of where this is, it's the 1900 block of Bay Street. It's an area that is kind of unique, multifamily housing. There are 15 homes, many of which are duplexes. And at the moment, there are 27 people living here. We've been facing some challenges in maintaining some of the homes because of two things, really. The main thing being encroachment on the Bay Street road allowance. And the second thing being that our zoning is out of date, and it was part of the 1999 blanket rezoning that made us not be what we are, which is multi-family residential. Instead, I think we're tourism commercial. Next slide. Here we go. Should have paid attention. That's it. This one? Super, thanks. So with this presentation, we are asking council to help us in 3 ways, but I think I went too far. How do I go back? There we go. Thank you. Thank you. I'll just look at you. Thanks. We want to ask council to allow us to maintain and rebuild our homes by dealing with encroachment concerns. We'd like those to be removed. And we'd like to rezone our property to match the current OCP and restore our legally conforming status. Next slide, please. So we need council's help because applications for maintenance permits for homes that are encroaching on Bay Street have been put on hold since around sometime in 2022. And we face hardship because of this. We've put together a brief timeline to explain when and how this encroachment happened, so a bit of the history, and what has been proposed as a solution by district staff and the previous council. We want to tell you about our issues or our problems with that solution, that proposed solution, and then we'd like to tell you what we would prefer instead. Next slide, please. So a little bit of the timeline. Back in 1940, well, between the years of 1943 and 1948, the homes that are currently Alliance Holdings were placed onto the lot that at that time was owned by Mrs. Littleton and Company, and a group of friends, I guess. And they rented out the lot to the Army people, and then later to Macmillan Bladel. When the homes were placed there, they were placed far away from the road, and this Bay Street road allowance was 66.5 feet. Next slide. In 1956, the Bay Street road allowance was decreased to 48.6 feet, and this allowed for space for a subdivision, basically Cedar and Cypress roads. You can see how that blue band changed to the green band, which was that 48.6 foot road allowance. Next slide, please. In 1961, Mrs. Littleton and partners divided the land that they owned, and part of it was sold to what became Alliance Holdings. But at the time when they did the subdivision, the Littleton Group was required to increase the road allowance back to the 66-foot wide footprint. And in doing so, that road allowance then encroached onto the pre-existing homes that were on Bay Street. So you can see the pink line that now runs through many of the houses that face Bay Street. So I want to stress that the migration of this lot line caused the road allowance to encroach upon pre-existing legally sited homes. Next slide, please. Unfortunately, there were no encroachment permits issued at that time. So as we've come to understand in exploring the history of what's happening and normal processes that occur when creating subdivisions, we've been told and we realized that the approving officer should not have allowed the creation of an unlawful situation by way of subdivision without also issuing some permits for those homes. So one of our requests for today is for council to correct this unlawful situation by issuing some belated permits. And I want to stress right now that Alliance Holdings has no wish to create a subdivision, no wish to change the position of those existing homes. We simply wish to maintain our homes in the places where they've always existed. Next slide, please. So we had been able to apply for building permits. As I mentioned, in 1999, there was a blanket rezoning that forced the properties into Ucluelet, many of properties in Ucluelet, as well as in Alliance Holdings, into a legally non-conforming status, which meant that whenever we wanted to do any sort of structural repairs, we had to go through a variance board, and we continue to have to do that. Over the years, our collective has received numerous variances and 19 building permits, and many of them have been for those houses on Bay Street, including mine, which is numbers 3 and 4. In 2022, unfortunately, we were asked to withdraw the variance permit application for repairs at houses 1 and 2, 1970 and 1972 Bay Street, and that was due to this longstanding encroachment issue. So staff took this to council, and we met with planning staff after that last summer, so in the summer of 2022. And they offered us a temporary 2-year license of occupation that would allow us to maintain our existing homes. But in exchange for that, we were asked to make a commitment to negotiate a long-term solution to the encroachments. Next slide, please. And part of that long-term solution, and this is a very key point, was a requirement for negotiating a transportation corridor through our property. Next slide, please. So that corridor is shown on the slide with the red lines, and you can see it would connect, it's in the OCP, and it would connect Cedar and Leach roads. But it would require going through property and resulting in the removal of 3 of our homes, 1 duplex and 1 single home. So we took this proposal that was presented as the board of Alliance Holdings to our shareholders, to the people that live on the property. And we'd done quite a bit of research talking to experts and lawyers, and we presented potential development options to our homeowners that could allow for that road, that transportation corridor, and could also potentially allow for us to move houses back from the Bay Street encroachment area. Next slide, please. The homeowners completely refused that proposal. They've made it very clear that our housing collective has no desire to shift our houses, nor to develop, nor to subdivide, or to change the quiet community that we live in to accommodate a transportation corridor. And there are all sorts of reasons for why we don't want that, why we don't want a transportation corridor, and they're outlined in the document that's in your package. But we really don't want to focus on that today. We really want to focus on what we think is our main point, and that is that we should not be forced to link maintaining our homes with a road that goes through our property. So we want council to de-link these two issues because we think it's unfair and unrelated to have them together. Next slide, please. So today, Alliance Holdings respectfully requests council to direct planning staff to do three things. The first is to deal with the encroachment issue, and we can think of two ways that could happen. One would be to issue the missing encroachment permits for the homes that occur along Bay Street. The other would be to simply reset the Bay Street road allowance to 50 feet without any pressure to build a transportation corridor through our three homes. Second, next slide. We respectfully ask that our property be rezoned to multifamily residential as part of the 2022 OCP, and this would fix our blanket rezoning problem that requires everyone to go to the variance board when they want to fix their homes. And the third thing we'd like is really just to be able to begin maintenance, have our maintenance applications received so that we can get on with maintaining our homes while these other processes are underway. So that's, thank you very much for hearing me out. Many of the people that live in our community are in the audience here today to support this. And I'd be happy to answer any questions. And if I get stuck, I might call on one or two of them to help me out. Thanks.
Thank you, Barb, for your presentation. Are there any questions from council? Councillor Mafti?
I have one really quick question through the mayor. The 7 homes or 7 houses that were identified there that are currently requesting building permits. I'm just wondering, it's a small town. I just want to put faces to the issue. If any of the people are in the audience here today are in the, okay, Mike, I don't know your name, sir. Joe, okay. And Caden. And then, yeah, okay, you I know. Yeah, I was just curious. I'm familiar with the issues. We have a ton of material, but just looking at the map and knowing some of the people who live there, I just wanted to see who here is in the Alliance Holdings group and who's actually in one of the properties that's highlighted here in the package that you presented. Thank you.
Other questions? Councillor Anderson?
Yeah, I had to read this a couple of times. There's a couple of parts here that seem a little bit a little hard to get my head around. But one of the things is by rezoning to multifamily, and I agree that's in the OCP and was changed from the blanket rezoning in 1999. What benefit is that? I'm just trying to get my head around that to change it back to multifamily. I realize it's the suitable one, but.
One of the main benefits is that if we are legally non-conforming, when we go to do any structural repairs on our homes, we don't just apply for a building permit, we also have to take it to the variance board. And if we were not in that situation, legally non-conforming, we would not have the need to go to the variance board. That would be true for all the homes except for the ones, I think, along Bay Street, which are facing this encroachment issue, unless that issue is also dealt with.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Yes, this has been going on for quite some time, and it seems to stem back to an approving officer just not doing their due diligence back in the 60s, which is pretty crazy. And that 1999 blanket zoning, I don't know what council was doing back then, because they actually made the fish plants on Eber Road zoned as residential.
So, yeah, that's right.
Like, why do that? So that blanket rezoning did affect a lot of places in our
The
community.
stickers or something like that. Is that the story of the stickers?
Yes, it's the story of the stickers. Eric Larson tells that story. Anyway, if there are no other questions, thank you very much for your presentation. And all of you don't have to stay if you don't want to for the rest of the meeting. Just giving you that option.
Thanks for coming, you guys, though. It's nice to see everyone.
Okay, is there any unfinished business?
Could I just ask what next steps are?
We have an in-camera report this evening which addresses your issues. So that I can't say any more than that.
For that in camera, is that strictly only for council, or can any of the Alliance Holdings membership be a part of that?
No, in-camera means that it's not open to the public. Yeah. All right, there are 2 report items on today's agenda. Our first report item is 6.1, 2024 Council Meeting Schedule. This item will be presented by our CAO, Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. This is the annual calendar of council meetings that is being presented to council this year. We need to do this before the end of the calendar year to publish it for public notice. What we've done is retain the Tuesday meetings at 4 o'clock throughout the year. We are recommending or proposing for council to eliminate the meetings in August so that council can have a break where you don't have to do council meetings. But we do have 2 meetings in July. Normally we've done 1 meeting in July and 1 meeting in August, but we thought might be nice to have a little bit of a break for council for meetings in all of August. If council's supportive of that, we can stick with the schedule as presented. If not, we can revise it as necessary by council. If August isn't the month that you want off, we can always change it to July or whatever you want to do. There are 3 oddball meetings in there, February 8th, October 10th, and October 21st. Those are in conflict with other activities within this room, primarily court. So we just bump it to the Thursday. We have done a check with all the conferences and tried to avoid conflict. So as we are aware of the schedules for all the conferences for 2024, we are not in conflict at this point in time, but things might change. So, but we can always add in special meetings or revise the meeting schedule as needed, or host special meetings if necessary for additional meetings throughout the year, including in August. If council has any questions, be happy to answer them.
Questions from council? The first thing I did was check the dates against the conferences, and you obviously had done that already, so that's perfect. I see no issues. Anybody have an issue with taking the month of August off?
I'm just, through the mayor, curious if we could sort of discuss that month. I know that August is nice enough to be around town, whereas January, February is not, and maybe some time in Mexico would be appreciated. I'm trying to fit that between council meetings. I just throwing it out there.
Zone. You could zoom in.
I don't want to zoom in. I want to sit on a palm tree.
Unfortunately, January and February are budget months.
Yeah, okay. December?
Nice try.
We could do the budget in Mexico. Is that what you're saying?
I like that idea.
See.
Okay, so second.
Well, that looks good to me.
All
Then
good?
We'll just leave it at that.
Leave it at that, okay. There is a recommendation if someone would like to move it.
I can do that. Sorry, jumped in. I would move the council adopt the 2024 annual council meeting schedule as presented in Appendix A to report number 23-150 and direct staff to give notice of the 2024 annual council meeting schedule.
I'll second.
Okay, and any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. The second report item is 6.2 1300 Peninsula Road, lease to West Coast Community Resources Society. This item will be presented by the Director of Community Planning, Mr. Gregg.
Thank you. Through the mayor, council has seen this before. Obviously, the lease for the municipal property at 1300 Peninsula Road proposed to lease it to the West Coast Community Resources Society for a period of 60 years for $1, subject to their successfully obtaining a grant from BC Housing for doing an affordable mixed rental housing project. That there's been a number of reports over the last year to council on this. Essentially, this is the step where we have given the lease of district properties a kind of disposition of land by lease. So we have a requirement to give notice of that, and so that notice has been published. It's on, I think, page 119 of the agenda. And so this is basically the opportunity for council to consider the public input, which was to be by written comment. I understand we have received none on this issue, so really council's now in a position to authorize the lease, again, subject to the grant being successful to have the funding for the housing project. If there are any questions, I can attempt to answer them. And
Questions from council? I think it's pretty well covered.
thank you.
Thank you. There is a recommendation if someone would like to move it.
I'll do that. I will move that, subject to the West Coast Community Resources Society receiving project funding from BC Housing Council, authorize the lease of the property at 1300 Peninsula Road to the Society for a fee of $1 annually plus GST for a term of 60 years to operate 5 units of mixed market and affordable community rental housing.
Do I have a seconder?
I'll second that.
Councillor Mafty. Any further discussion?
I'm just wondering if the wording of that is clear, and I'm wondering if it should be that subject to the West Coast Community Resource Society receiving funding. Oh, no, that's fine. I guess from BC Housing, maybe there should be a comma, but I understand. I read that as BC Housing Council authorizing. I was like, wait a minute, who's authorizing? I get it. Withdrawn.
There should be a comma.
I'm not going to slow us down for a comma. More than I already have.
Any further discussion? All in favor? None opposed, and that carries. Thank you. Now we just need that grant. Are there any notices of motion? There are 4 correspondence items. Would council like to bring any forward to discuss? I'd like to bring your attention to the letter from Ravi Kahlon, the Minister of Housing. He's covering off all the bills that he's introduced recently to support local governments getting more homes built faster. And just a note that on page 129, the ministry has committed to $51 million in funding for local governments to support planning and capacity to meet these new requirements. The funding will be allocated on population and the volume of work needed. And the funding will be distributed in early 2024. So we don't know what that looks like for our community exactly, but I guess we'll find out early next year. But at least that's a monetary commitment, recognizing that municipalities are being given a lot of work to do in this regard, and there's not enough staff or hours in the day to get it all done. So this may help with building our capacity. Any comments?
Yeah, the 51 million sounds like a big number until you divide that by the population of BC and you realize we're going to get about $50.
Let's hope it's more than $50. I'm just happy to see that they've acknowledged the fact that they're downloading all this responsibility to local governments.
Yeah, we'll get an Amazon gift card. It'll be awesome.
Any other correspondence that council would like to bring forward? Just receive. There is one information item, and I would like to bring this forward for discussion. I found it a really interesting read. It's kind of a follow-up to the District of Ucluelet Zoning Amendment Bylaw number 1310, 2022, which addresses how bed and breakfasts can operate. And the result of that bylaw has made 16 residences now full-time residences rather than short-term rentals. And 3 B&B licenses were cancelled outright, probably because the owners don't live in the community. So that's a total of 19 homes that aren't short-term rentals anymore. This bylaw has also slowed down the process of applications for bed and breakfasts, from what I understand. Mr. Gregg, would you like to maybe comment on that for us?
Certainly, and Sam, if I could share my screen, I could share it. Basically, put the slide up there to show it. I thought there might be a question. Oh, it says it's screen sharing is disabled. Here we go. There we are. So, just for those who are watching, this was 2 bylaws were brought into place last year. 1310, which changed the zoning regulations to require that principal residence, and 1313, which put it into the business licensing as well. And those changes we realized would affect B&B operators before they renewed their business licenses in April. And so we had to do some work to smooth this out, because staff realized that there's going to be a lot of confusion and a lot of questions started coming our way. So some of the steps, there was something called a privacy impact assessment that we needed to do. And this is something that the province has brought in fairly recently that keeps Mr. Rotenberg very busy, where any kind of change around your gathering information, you're really processing any information from the public needs to be assessed for how does this impact someone's, the handling of personal information. So we had to go through that step, and then we were communicating out to the public on how is this change going to be implemented, what does it mean. So there was a mail out with some infographics, which I'll show you in the next slide, followed up by email on those people who we knew were license holders who'd be renewing that we didn't have any indication of whether it was their principal residence or not. And then further a follow up by phone, and it's not exaggerating to say answer 1,000 questions. So the infographics were really, what's this change in the zoning regulation? What does it mean? What does lawful non-conforming mean? And all that kind of stuff. And then what are the business license requirements? And really trying to help put some information in people's hands on, what does that owner occupancy, what does principal residence mean? Because we knew this was a change that some people would struggle with. And the result of that, as you can see in the blue, the light blue was people where we already had information that indicated that it was their principal residence. So there was nothing for them to do. And I know that looks like a square root sign. It's supposed to be a check mark. And so that was 96 of them, of the license holders. And then the sort of minty green 79 owners, they then just established that their property was their principal residence. They showed us their homeowner grant, and box checked. That was okay. That was good. And then we had this other group of 19 that it wasn't their principal residence, and so 14 of them established a long-term tenant as the business license holder. So they basically changed their operation to get a renter who was willing to be the operator of the business, and so that person is now housed. So the B&B is continuing, but there's somebody there who's a Euclid resident who's running it. A couple of them canceled their business license and just changed to a long-term tenant outright. So, and that reflects, as expected, there's a whole range of B&Bs. Some are large operations, some it's kind of occasional. So a couple of them are like, hey, let's just get a tenant in, and that's that. And then 3 of them just canceled it outright. And that's quite likely that could be a second homeowner who didn't need the income or was considering selling or that sort of thing. So they just said, no, we won't renew our license. So I think it was overall successful, and as much the takeaway for us was around the process. I think, aside from seeing the numbers, and I think that idea that did it result in 16 people getting housing where they didn't previously, that I think is a win. The little changes in the organization like this, it has these sort of ripple effects throughout different. So this, because a business license, it involves planning, bylaw, fire, finance. So there's a whole lot of coordination of literally getting 1,000 questions from these 200 license holders. What does it all mean? And trying to really coordinate that to not confuse what could already be confusing for people. So I think the communication, the effort that went into the communication was worthwhile. It does take time. There's a lot of staff work. And so something like this, as we, I think, are probably facing a whole bunch of process changes in the coming months and years, as we're hearing about all the requirements and changes of what the playbook is around housing. These are probably good lessons. And in this case, I think those sort of changes need a champion who kind of spearheads things. And in this instance, I got to give full credit to our former assistant planner, Monica Whitney Brown, who really tackled this, really took this on, and was also the front person fielding so many of those questions and kind of steering people through the process. And even, she did the summary before she left and wrote most of the report that's on your agenda here. So, sometimes you really can take advantage of having a person who really sees a community need and go, oh, this is going to be a wrinkle. Let's try and smooth it out as best as we can before people trip on it. So if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions for Mr. Gray? Councillor Mafty?
Through the mayor. Quick comment. I love the infographic. Sorry, my foot keeps slipping on the carpet here. I just have one quick question about the last bottom right corner of the second page of the infographic here that basically highlights the fact that an existing non-conforming B&B can continue even if the property is sold. And I'm wondering what the rationale was behind that, and if that's something that could be reconsidered. I'm wondering if there's any mechanism to change that.
What an outstanding and timely question, through the mayor, because lawful non-conforming is really this is something that, in those changes that was in the minister's letter and the legislation that's been introduced in BC. The lawful non-conforming status has really kind of been something that has been part of legislation and case law in BC for 80 or 100 years. And part of the legislation actually will remove that lawful non-conforming status for short-term rentals only, which is a real change in the rules. And so in the past, what it meant is that if you are, say, whatever land use, industrial, commercial, residential, if you put a property legally to that use, you build a house, you build a business, whatever, and then later there's a change and the council changes the zoning, it doesn't wipe out those uses. It allows you to carry on. It doesn't force you to, tear down your building or stop what you're doing, as long as you don't discontinue it for more than 6 months or a year. So basically you can continue, but the law sort of recognizes that eventually it's assumed that some change will happen. It'll be brought into conformity with the current laws. So that's what's sort of referred to as that lawful non-conforming status. So at the time that this was done a year ago, the B&B was established and was lawfully there, that they could continue. That if there was a bylaw change that said, hey, here's some of the regulations have changed, the zoning would allow it. Now the province has really done something that we haven't seen before, where they're actually changing by legislation to allow a community, if a local council wants to adopt a bylaw to say this is a use that we want to remove from our zoning to make, say, residential neighborhoods truly residential, they won't enjoy the lawful non-conforming status. So council could choose to sunset those uses immediately, or have a time or a lead-in period where they would become just non-conforming and have to shut down. And that's a new one for us.
Yes, I read something to that extent in the news yesterday, and I was thinking this will be an interesting question to ask today. Okay, amazing. So at this point, it would probably be premature. I realize that's not what's before us right now. But at what point, if that was something that council wanted to consider, would it be possible to address the issue? And would council, like, what would be the mechanism through which council could suggest that this is something that we might want to consider or we might want to do?
Through the mayor, I'll offer a couple answers to that. One is that it's a motion-driven process. If council says we pass a motion and we direct staff to go do something, well, then that's our marching orders. But to put it also in context, two things. One, we're all just trying to understand what the new rules of the game are from the province. A lot of the details haven't come out yet. It is all so fresh, and there's some pretty major changes that they're making, like figuring out, okay, what are the implications? What must we do? What can we do? What might benefit the community or not? Like, there's work to be done here to understand it before we can bring it back to council and say, okay, here's what we think the rules of the game are and what might be some recommendations going forward. The other thing is that there's been a whole lot of discussion, both in our OCP, in your strategic plan, in things like the potential changes around housing, the Housing Accelerator Fund, that whole list of things that we could accelerate or just pick away at as we have the capacity to do it. Within that, definitely, there's some things that have already been seen by council about prompting changes to some of the zoning and regulations that may very well be part of that. So it's either, I think it's coming, in one way or another, but certainly council at any time could, if there is a direction you want us to explore, we could accelerate that, I guess. I think part of the budget process as well, around, okay, are there issues, does it take additional resources? That's also something, another avenue to discuss that.
Thank you.
There was another part of that legislation that came out a few weeks ago that said that the 14 resort municipalities of British Columbia would be automatically opted out unless they actually want to opt in to that legislation. So that would be something for us to discuss as well.
Through the mayor, certainly. And in the case, like with the bylaw changes made, last year, they really kind of foreshadowed where the province was going around the short-term rentals. Like, some of the things already are in our bylaws now. But again, understanding, okay, what are the new rules? What are the new possibilities? And bringing them forward is, okay, here's options. Does it make sense to opt in or out? What does that look like? As I said, it's all very fresh and changing almost day to day.
Any other questions for Mr. Gregg?
No, just a comment. I do a lot of research on this, and there's a growing chorus of people concerned that there's an overcorrection taking place in this realm, and rather than taking a restrictive approach to things, there's so much in this legislation to promote building of new housing as opposed to spending so many resources to try and free up 2 units of housing in somebody else's house. So I just want to be careful about how we look at this and what's the best bang for the buck. How are we going to get more housing for the amount of staff time that we have to allocate to it? And with all the programs and funding and grants, we could be building massive amounts of housing to the point where STRs are irrelevant, and we shouldn't be wasting our time really trying to nitpick each individual unit and just go for it and let's build some housing.
That's a good point. Councillor Kennington. Councillor Anderson.
That was just basically going to be my point as well, but just as an acknowledgement to start off, I think it was the housing minister, the federal housing minister, had said that BC was ahead of the curve in what they did with their legislation. And now the federal government's looking at doing it. But I would say that you were probably ahead of BC because you were doing that ahead of that. So it was hats off to you guys for doing that. But the one warning in the same vein is I think there was probably a backlog of creating affordable housing or housing in general for so long, and my worry is that we vilify the low-hanging fruit, which is the short-term rentals. And I definitely, if there's illegal ones or ones that are being done improperly, then definitely that's a problem. But I think that in resort municipalities, there is a room for someone who wants to come and maybe not stay in a hotel and experience the community by staying in a B&B. I think there's a place for that. So that was my comment. Was I just think we have to be careful not to overly vilify the short-term rental as the evil. And if we fix that, we fix everything. We just need to build more housing, I think that's just my comment. Sorry for the rant.
No, that's a good rant. Yeah. I don't see any other questions, so thank you very much for being prepared for that question.
Sure, thanks.
All right, we're on to Mayor's announcements and Council Committee reports. Councillor Anderson, you're up.
Okay, so what was it last week? Was Committee of the Whole on Tuesday. Wednesday, I had the ACHN, the Alberni Clayoquot Health Network's strategic planning, which was a kind of a full day affair. It was like 9:30 to 2:30, I believe. I had a note on that and I can't find it. There it is. So that was interesting. That was led by Marcy, and it was a hybrid. So everyone met up in Port Alberni live for that. So to do our strategy going forward, and their key priority out of a bunch of things, I'll keep it brief, was poverty reduction. Was that the main takeaway for that one? And then the next day, same thing we had around the same time, 9 to 2 or 9 to noon, was decolonize. So I think you were in that as well. So that was interesting. That was also with Marcy and the gang, and that was really interesting. I didn't know how that was going to go, but that was great. I think Mr. Greg was there too on that one. Yeah, so that was really useful and insightful. I had a good time going to that. And the next one is, I think, Thursday. Yeah, and that's it for me.
Great, thank you. Councillor Hoare is not here today. Councillor Kennington.
Not much to report. Just last Wednesday.
Committee of the Whole.
Well, I wasn't going to mention that. I was just going to mention the Accessibility Committee meeting, which was
good.
Ongoing. I say the same thing every time. We're doing great. We're actually, pen is on the paper, so that's all I really have to say.
Do you have some goals and objectives that are identified?
We're actually beyond that. We're actually narrowing it down to policy initiatives and direction.
Great. That's amazing. One of the ACRD meetings I was at recently was just at the stage of appointing their disability committee, so we're ahead of the game on that one.
Yeah, I think we have 2 more meetings before we are finished the framework, and then it'll just be putting it into a document. So
Excellent.
We're well ahead.
Excellent. Councillor Mafty.
Not much to report. November 9th, I attended the CBT's Vital Signs open house. It was lovely. There were some really interesting presentations, and of course we had a chance to look at the new Vital Signs report. I had volunteered to bring a whole bunch back, but I think somebody else might have dropped off a whole box of them, and I recommend that everyone take a look. There's a lot of great information and a few interesting things that were different for this year. Is there's kind of like a living document that's accessible through a web page that the CBT's linked to on their website, where you can not just sort of track changes over time, but there are links to all of the raw data that went into the report, which for a science data minded person such as myself was really interesting, because sometimes there's like a little blurb, an infographic, something, and you want more. You want to understand, okay, well, how did those numbers end up in this final format? And the ability to go and look at that original raw data set is, I think, really, really interesting, and opens up a lot of possibilities for digging a little deeper into some of the issues that people might be interested in learning more about. So anyway, the event was great. And then this is sort of neither here nor there, and not local at all, but I know one of the things that I appreciated when we all started this term was hearing from the different department heads, and I remember going to the fire hall and hearing from Chief Geddes about this and that and the other, and we've had requests for equipment and training. And I was just in Florida taking a course, and we went to this firefighting college to take this firefighting course, and I don't think I really appreciated just how intense and complicated the entire process is, and even hearing stuff from Chief Geddes about, oh, well, we need, you know, new equipment for this or that or the other, and you sort of like, okay, well, yeah, like everyone wants new stuff, but I feel like doing some hands-on firefighting gave me a real appreciation for just how important it is to have a team that's, you know, well trained and well versed in the intricacies of all these different protocols, and also well equipped. So that's just something that I thought I'd share with all of you.
So you'll be a bit generous with his budget this coming year?
Well, that's not at all the point that I'm trying to make, but it's it was one of those things that really opened my eyes to I remember at one point he said, oh, well, we want these new respirators and we want a second set of turnout gear. And boy, I'll tell you, it's Florida, so it was like 40 degrees, but you put that stuff on for an hour and it's just completely soaked in sweat. And then if you actually go and fight a fire, it all has to be cleaned properly. I thought, like, geez, how hard can it be to just like throw that stuff in the wash? And it's like very hard, very hard. And that's something that I didn't appreciate at the time.
Interesting. Thank you for those thoughts.
There you go.
Yeah. All right. For myself, November 8th, I went to Port Alberni because it was the ACRD meeting was in the afternoon, but they had a strategic planning update meeting in the morning. And so I thought everybody would be there for that, but there were only 4 of us. Everybody else was on Zoom. But oh well, it was a day trip to Port. And so the update to their strategic plan is how they develop their budget. So that's their first step toward their budget process. And at the board meeting in the afternoon, they elected their new chair, which is their old chair, John Jack, and their vice chair, which is their old vice chair, Deb Haggard. So there was an election for those 2 officers. November 11th, I actually emceed the Remembrance Day service at the Army Navy, so that was my first time doing that. And it hailed. And then the sun came out and there was a rainbow, and it was actually quite beautiful. I was really, really pleased to be a part of that officially. November 14th, we had the Committee of the Whole with all our societies. We heard from 16 of them. They weren't all there, but it's always great to get an update from our nonprofit groups. And just another reminder, December 15th is the deadline for the grants in aid applications from those nonprofits. November 16th, I attended the Decolonize First workshop with Councillor Anderson and Mr. Gregg. It's a 4-part workshop via Zoom put on by the Alberni-Clayoquot Health Network, and so the second one is this Thursday morning. And then this past weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, I attended the Tourism Ucluelet Board Retreat at Pacific Sands. This is my first year as a voting member on that board, and so my first board retreat, and it was really interesting. It's a great group of people they have on that tourism board at the moment. Denise Dice-Norman has resigned. She only has a couple of more weeks with them, and so the first day of the retreat was to figure out next steps and what's how to replace her or what that looks like. And then the Sunday morning we went over the 2024 tactical plan, and Denise is going to be presenting that in person at our next council meeting, December 7th. That's it for me. Any questions?
I forgot I also went to the Remembrance Day, and it did indeed hail. That was just ridiculous.
Okay. Question period. This is an opportunity for the public to ask questions about matters within council's jurisdiction. Representations about matters that have been the subject of a public hearing are not permitted at this time. Are there any questions from the audience? All 3 of you. You have to go up to the mic, I'm sorry. You sat at the wrong end of the room.
I'm Fawn Ross. We have property that's down on Cedar Road at 1645. So I
Just speak it to the mic, please. Thanks,
No.
Fawn.
No, I'm trashing the place too. I just had a question about. I understand with the short-term rental regulations that are coming out, the communities have the option of opting into that. Am I correct when you said, Mayor, that that resort municipalities also have the option of opting in, or is that specific? Are you guys excluded from the option to opt in?
No, so currently all municipalities are covered by this legislation, but they have taken the 14 resort municipalities out of it because we are dependent on tourism and accommodation. So it would be our choice if we wanted to opt in to that legislation, and that's a discussion we haven't had yet.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I think it's also population as well was the second.
The population was the other. Smaller communities are not under, and I can't remember what that number is.
1,000? I want to say it was 2,000.
I thought it was 10,000.
5,000? 5,000.
Yeah,
Mr.
5,000.
5,000. So communities under 5,000 are automatically opted out, unless I guess they choose to opt in. You're welcome.
It was like the price is right there for a second. Right?
It was $1.
Are there any questions by Zoom or telephone?
If any of our Zoom attendees have a question for council this evening, if you could please click the raise your hand icon. There are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you. And have we received any questions via email to communityinput@ucluelet.ca?
There are no questions to communityinput@ucluelet.ca.
Okay, then I now move that the meeting be closed to the public in order to address agenda items under section 90 brackets 1 brackets E brackets F and brackets J of the Community Charter. E, the acquisition, disposition, or expropriation of land or improvements if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the interests of the municipality. F, law enforcement if the council considers that disclosure could reasonably be expected to harm the conduct of an investigation under or enforcement of an enactment. J, information that is prohibited or information that if it were presented in a document would be prohibited from disclosure under Section 21 of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act of the Community Charter. So I move that the meeting is now closed to the public. Can I have a seconder?
I'll second.
Councillor Kennington, all in favor? None opposed, and that carries.
Bye.
Thanks for coming.